This video into us this morning from Seattle, where protesters staged a sit-in at City Hall to back their demand to defund the police force. Seattle police have repeatedly used tear gas against protesters over the past week. They vowed they would not do so, and when they did again on Sunday night, protests moved into City Hall itself. The sit-in ended, though, without incident. So defund police. What does it look like when you defund a police force? And how about break one down, rebuild it almost from scratch? We look to the example of Camden, New Jersey this morning, and we do it with the help of a Canadian expat. I want to introduce you to Bruce Main, who's from Vancouver, but he's been running a community group that helps young people in Camden for more than 30 years. He's the founder and president of Urban Promise, and he is in Camden with us this morning. Mr. Main, welcome to our program.
Hey, thanks for having me. It's great to be here.
Well, everyone's so curious about what this could look like in a community because defund police is something that we are talking about increasingly. And as we begin our conversation, I want people to understand 7-8 years ago, your community of Camden was a dangerous place. It had the highest murder rate in North America at the time. So that would be a time you would think it would be logical to hear calls for more police. How did Camden decide to go in the opposite direction?
Yeah, well, I think it was a number of things, but as you mentioned, things were so bad. We had one of the highest murder rates per capita, I think, in North America. You know, we were continually noted as one of the poorest, most violent cities in America. So, you know, it kind of reached a head in 2012. And, you know, when they dissolved the police force that had been in existence for about 140 years, you know, it was pretty controversial and a lot of people were really concerned. But, you know, again, over the last 6 or 7 years with new leadership, a new culture, a new philosophy on a more community-based approach to policing, you know, getting out of the cars, walking the beat, meeting people, going into local businesses, it's changed considerably.
Okay, so you just raised a lot of the things that you did. Let's just highlight some of them particularly. You said they dissolved the police force of 140 years. What were the specifics of the change that Camden enacted?
Well, specifically, there was, I believe at the time, about 200 officers. So all the officers were technically fired at that time. They were allowed to reapply for this new police force. And I believe out of that couple of hundred, about 50% were rehired, but they had to go through a reapplication process, physical tests, psychological tests. But there was a new chief police that came in, Scott Thompson, who, again, had this philosophy vision about sort of breaking down this urban warrior sort of mentality and creating more of a guardian mentality for the policing. And again, that led to a lot of, you know, community interaction, building trust with the community. And again, I think one of the testimonies of that was last Saturday when you saw pictures of the chief of police of our city and the coordinator for the Black Lives Matter movement in our city sort of marching hand in hand. And again, this is a city that's got a history of violence. So, you know, that's the hard work of 6 or 7 years of really building trust.
We're looking at that picture right now. We were highlighting that as he led the march. I'm going to come back to some of the points then again that you have raised, but I'm just interested then in how does a community group like yours then come into play?
Well, you know, we work with youth and, you know, we're just one piece of a larger puzzle. And I think, you know, again, police can't do it all. I mean, you know, so a group like ours, you know, we are getting kids off the streets. We're getting them into programs that challenge them to grow academically, spiritually, socially. And, you know, I don't know whether you know, like statistically, if a young person gets involved in the juvenile justice system over their lifetime, the cost to society is about $2 million, according to economist Mark Cohen out of Vanderbilt. And so, you know, again, what groups like ours are doing, I mean, we want to work side by side with the police, but we want to create a safe community, a community where everybody can flourish. Mm-hmm. And that needs to be a different kind of model, I think, of policing.
So defunding doesn't necessarily mean you're just stopping paying, but reallocations of the funds. Did an organization like yours, were you the beneficiary of reallocation of monies?
Well, no, we weren't. And I think that's part of this conversation that we're having nationally right now is organizations like ours and other organizations in the city that I think are really helping to reduce crime, helping to get kids involved in, programs that are positive and help them to flourish. That I think we should be benefiting in some way, and resources should be allocated to groups that are, again, providing mental health services and recreational services and educational services. Because again, at the end of the day, we want to create better communities, and that comes by, creating all kinds of programs that allow people to flourish and grow.
How long did it take before these changes made things better in Camden?
Yeah, well, immediately I remember when the transition was made, and there was a lot of controversy around it, and people were afraid because we came off one of our highest crime years ever in the history of our city. So, we wondered what's going to happen in sort of this vacuum with new officers coming in. But one of the things that I remember noting initially was just the presence of the police on the streets. I'd never seen that before, just walking through neighborhoods, talking to people. So that was visible from the outset. But again, if you look over the last 6 or 7 years, violent crime is down significantly. Our murder rate's down significantly. So I think, there's been some real positive steps forward. And again, peaceful demonstrations these last 2 weekends, I think gives a lot of hope to organizations like ours.
The force was a comparatively small one. I think about 200 officers were let go initially. What do you think in terms of the Camden example applying to a much bigger city like Toronto, for example, with more than 5,000 officers?
Yeah, I think it's a challenge, and again, this is not my field of expertise by any means. Camden's a relatively small city, about 100,000 people, just less than 100,000 people. But again, I think philosophically, when we begin to look at, again, these partnerships and building relationships, building trust, it comes from leadership. And I think, that's where we need to begin. And whether it could work in a city as big as Toronto, I'm not sure. But again, if we, continue to build relationships, build trust, if police are seen there not as adversarial, but as, partners in making better communities, I think we're going to see change.
Thank you so much. Lots to follow in Camden, and it's a very interesting story, and you're a big part of it. Thank you for being our guest, big part of our program today. Thanks, Mr. Main.
Yeah, thanks so much. Have a great day.
You too. Bruce Main in Camden, New Jersey.